Josh, the misandry bubble. This is part of the reason movies suck so much today, as well as society in general. What do I mean by that? It's not misogyny, which is the hatred of women, but misandry, which is the hatred of men. I would argue we live in a society that is organized mainly around a matriarchal structure versus a paternal structure. So that's just a fancy way of saying it's done around the organization of female imperatives versus around the organization of masculine imperatives. And I think part of the problem is that we're now having to pay the price. There are, of course, pros and cons in, whatever decision we choose to make. And you always want to ask the question, Josh, at what cost does this come at? But I think in the West, particularly in the West, we're having to come to our moment of truth here, or the moment of truth is quickly arriving as to what do we really want from our society.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is just happening everywhere. People are just looking down on strong men and alpha men. They are just told that it's toxic masculinity. And it's why is it that society is deeming men as bad? And in fact, they want men to be women and they want women to be men. It is just completely perverse. Like movies just suck. They're utterly garbage. And you can see this in the stats. Any leading, let's just use superhero films. What was it that when you were a kid you thought of a superhero? You'd think of Superman or Spider-Man or Batman. It was almost always, almost by design, the man was at the end of every single one of these superheroes, and that was because men want to look up to superheroes and try and emulate their actions. What do we see today? Now we have She-Hulk coming out in the theaters near you, and I am gonna put a strong prediction that it's probably going to bomb because nobody wants to watch it. Women don't want to be men. They don't want to be superheroes. That is not really what they strive to be. And men don't want to watch women be superheroes, which they want to be. It is completely perverse and doesn't make any sense. But if you say that, it is you're just a toxic masculine when the stats don't lie, when the masses choose and the free market decides that they don't like what they are seeing, but the woke agenda is being pushed over everything.
The way I would describe it is that like you have the concept. So there's multiple lenses to go after this. The Fourth Turning, I think, is a really good lens because they talk about the difference between, let's say, collectivism versus individuality. So you can make an argument, not to go too far down memory lane here, but at the end of World War II, we were in a high. So society was very, very strong. In other words, society could do anything, but the individuals could feel nothing. So the sin or the price that you pay for then was conformity, in the sense that you would have like, what was that line where you had like, the TV dinners served, everyone ate the same TV dinners, watching the same 3 TV channels, living in the same, cardboard cutted houses in suburbia or whatever. But the point is that society was very well organized. The individual was constrained essentially. And through that constraint, society got a huge benefit. They were able to fight, win World War II, get depression, whatever. Now, since then you had the boomers, that were born during this time frame. They came of age in the conscious revolution of the late 60s and the 70s, and you had the pendulum focus very much on individuality. That's kind of what we have right now. And this is, I would say, the sin of the individual, or too much individualism, is that you can be anything you want to be. And the accident of birth. So, for example, if you feel inside that you want to be a woman, but you by birth were born a male or whatever, right? We're going to change that. And you have this imperative to really basically say the individual can do whatever you want. I would guess, although I can't really back this up, but this is my gut feeling, that the focus on the individual is more of the feminine nature and the focus on the collective society is more of the masculine in nature. And I suspect part of the mechanics that's going around right now in society is that just as you have the pendulum swing one way, so it swings during an unraveling from the Fourth Turning, it swings very, very far towards the individual. I would say very, very far towards the female imperative, or the female imperatives is probably the best way to say that. Sooner or later, it has to swing back. I'm not saying one's bad or one's worse, but rather you need things to go through cycles. You don't want it to constantly be in the masculine. You don't want it to constantly be in the feminine. And what's going on right now is we are getting to levels that are just obscene for how out of balance we are. And the funny thing is, we were about to do another video on this, is that the more and more you have the voices that screech, oh, well, society is so tilted against minorities, society is so tilted against women, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The answer is like, no, it's actually not. It's tilted against men. Like that's the thing, right? I mean, you mentioned, you someone who went off to school recently, and if you basically are in a position of incredible privilege, if you're not a white male, I guess now not an Asian as well, because Asians are about to fall into that category. But nonetheless, there's a lot of I think some things that come up from this. But to your point right now is that society in the West is sooner or later going to have to realize that being a strong male, like a role model that I grew up with would be like Patrick Stewart, Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek: The Next Generation would be like maybe an iconic one from the late '80s, early '90s for that. But sooner or later, like men in general in the West are going to have to basically find their nuts and realize, like, hey, listen, we might be called bad names. We might be thought of as evil, horrible, racist, Islamophobia, homophobia, whatever, right? Just put me down for all of those. Like, I'll freely admit, yes, 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 I'm all the bad things you can possibly think of me. And now that that's out of the way, we can actually get to the business of trying to run society. And yes, running society might mean having to make some people feel bad, and that might mean having to hurt some feelings. So this is where you get back into the female imperative right there, because ladies, much more so than men, I think, are much more in tune with their feelings. But at the same time, reality has to override your feelings. Like you cannot have your feelings override reality ad nauseum. It's like you can't expand a balance sheet indefinitely. Sooner or later, you're going to have a come to Jesus moment. And you just hope it doesn't kill you in the process. Rant over.
What I see, which is just disappointing, is that I see men today, they are just folding, and they are just completely obliging and saying, you know what, maybe me being a man is wrong, and they're apologizing for actions that they shouldn't be, and even worse, they are acting like women, and they are just it just makes absolutely no sense.
So Tate's a good example of this. You want an example before Tate? This came out like years ago. There's some interview of like this like Australian, I don't know, like this punk kid or whatever, right? His parents were out of town. He threw like this raging kegger at his parents' house, whatever. He's being interviewed. And you could see him hold frame incredibly well when he was being interviewed. Like the kid just didn't give a about what was going on. And you can actually see the play out. See, the thing is, like, men have forgotten how to be men, and they're just so afraid of
Everything.
yeah. And it's like, guys, like, find your nuts. Like,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. And Justin, I mean, you've met me in person, but like, this is me saying this. Like, if like me is like the last or one of the last voices, on this saying, like, guys, you really need to man
you
up.
are
Like,
not the definition of masculinity. Like we should not be the ones saying this, because what I would consider a strong alpha man is the furthest thing from what me and Justin do. I mean, it is the complete opposite spectrum. We would be seen as like girly guys, and if we were in a 1950,
oh yeah, yeah.
today, like 100%. But like today, if you just have not even just a backbone, if you don't take just massive amounts of, then you are you're like a toxic man. And I mean, if me and Justin are seen as toxic masculine men in today's day and age, like it could not even make sense to me what they would think of everyday men in the 1950s, which happened to be like the most successful time for marriages and the nuclear family, when men and women actually cared for each other. It is just I don't know, we have to reverse course, but it seems like men almost want to be women on this state, because they want to give away their drive where they need to succeed for a family.
Yeah. Like the way I would say it, not to get too philosophical here, is like we have to embrace the accidents of birth. In other words, like, yeah, if you're born a man, you have certain advantages, you have certain disadvantages. If you're born a woman, you have certain advantages, you have certain disadvantages. I mean, you can make the same thing about race too. You have certain advantages and certain disadvantages. By all means, do what makes sense for the individual, and always judge the individual as the individual, but like embrace it or whatever, right? Like,
and I would say one more thing to someone who thinks that they have been so oppressed their entire life. Try being born in like Afghanistan. Like you're saying that as someone who was born in America, which is, you're fortunate enough to have the strongest currency in the world, which you do not know how important that actually is, and to have actual opportunities. I was in Colombia a few weeks ago, and I was staying at a nice hotel, and one of the kids, we were the exact same age. He was a Colombian. He was learning English, spoke pretty good. We were talking back and forth for a long time, and he was saying it was his dream to go to America. And I was saying, well, I actually might be moving here. And he was saying, why would you do that? It makes no sense. There's no opportunities in Colombia. He was like, I want to go down to the United States because that's where all the good jobs are. I can pretty much do anything in life. Like, he was believing in the American dream as a Colombian. Have you ever seen an American talk about their country like that? And have you ever seen any other country in the world talk about another country like that, where their goal was saying, oh, all the opportunity is in Colombia. We all need to go to Colombia. No, because that's not the way the world works. Right now, all the jobs are in America. And if you go anywhere in the world, they are going to say that they want to go to America because they could get a better opportunity. So just try going to another country and talking to these people who, by any standard, would be living in the most oppressed, like third world whole country that people would imagine that I think are really nice.
Josh, there's two things that immediately come to mind when you say that. The first thing is, if you haven't already watched it out, there's a great speech by Evan Sayat. I think I showed it to you in Vegas last time we were in that neck of the woods. Where basically, so the guy's giving a speech to the Heritage Foundation. He's like, you know what I found out when I looked at all my liberal friends? It's like, you always like go to the bar with the guys, and the guy's like, oh yeah, I really hate my wife or whatever, right? But then all of a sudden, like, one of the times the guy says this, and you look out the window and you see like the wife's actually getting beat up. And you're like, oh, hey, listen, dude, I know you hate your wife, but look, your wife's getting beat up over there. We need to run and go save her. And he's like, oh, no, she probably deserves it. At which point it kind of dawned on Evan when he was talking about it. It's like, oh, yeah, they really do hate America. It's not like just they're saying it. Like, no, they actually really do hate America. That's the first thing. The second thing is Friedman made a quote where he's like, I have been at meetings where America was vehemently criticized in English, where people were speaking English to criticize America. And it's like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, by all means, we can always do better. And I'm not saying we shouldn't try to have like self-reflect and sort of try to criticize, but you have to criticize, or just as you must give critique where critique's due, you must give credit where credit's due. As Jordan Peterson says, the evil white male patriarchy that's been incredibly oppressive and responsible for all the bad things in the universe and all your mistakes, because you certainly aren't responsible for them, it actually affords you the ability to criticize itself in the first place, which those who criticize seem to be oblivious to. As Scott Adams oftentimes and wisely mentions, I can't read minds, but when you see the same pattern over and over and over again, you kind of start drawing some probability clouds of what's going on. But that's a different topic.
If you think that we need weak men, or not even weak men, but if you think that strong alpha perceived men are a threat to society, I suggest that you go to a foreign country, a third world. Why don't you try Bangladesh? I hear it's lovely this time of year, and just live there for a month. And I want you to think how oppressed you actually are when you are driving by these people's houses who literally don't even have roofs. They just shove whatever they can on top of their house so rain doesn't get in. And I'm not joking when I say this is the way that the world works, because when you go up a gondola through Colombia, you see the further up the mountains they go. They live in huts. And I would challenge any person.
Favelas.
That's what it's called, yeah. Has any person in America, do you think that your oppression is even considerable to that of someone who lives in one of these third world countries? And if it is, why don't you move out there and go make a life for yourself? And those people are some of the happiest people I've ever met in my entire life. That's what's even more amazing, because they're greeting with a massive smile on your face saying, wow, like I'm glad that you're here spending your money, providing opportunities for us, or else our life would be even worse off. I mean, it is just the perverse sense of what Americans, and especially people of ethnic color who have been told their entire life how oppressed that they are, and then white people now thinking that they are bad because of the way that they were born. Then they think that they're living in this micro ecosystem where you've never seen anything else, and compared to what goes on in the real world, you're living on snowflakes and sunshine.
Josh, I hate to admit this, but that Roth who spilt the beans talking about the square caps on people's round heads, yep.
Weak men, strong women. When will these trends reverse?